Imagine stepping into a city hall a century ago. You would likely see rows of clerks shuffling papers, officials debating policy behind closed doors, and a steady hum of bureaucracy as decisions filtered down from the upper levels of government to the people affected by them. Governance in that era was a distinctly human affair, rooted in hierarchy, tradition, and face-to-face interactions. Decisions were made by individuals, guided by laws and social norms, but also subject to the flaws and limitations of human judgment, bias, slow processing, and occasional opacity. This was a world where information moved at the pace of paper, and transparency was often more an ideal than a reality. Fast forward to today, and the landscape of governance has been dramatically transformed. At the heart of this change is a concept that has emerged over the past decade as a defining feature of digital society: algorithmic governance. This new way of organizing and directing social life is fundamentally different from what came before. It is not just the digitization of old processes or the automation of clerical tasks. Instead, algorithmic governance represents an evolution in social ordering, where algorithms, sets of rules and processes encoded in digital technologies, coordinate actors, and make decisions that shape our collective existence. The origins of algorithmic governance are closely linked to the broader evolution of digital technology. As societies have become more reliant on data and as computational power has increased, the ability to collect, analyze, and act on vast amounts of information has transformed decision-making. Where policymakers and administrators once relied on intuition and limited data sets, they now increasingly turn to algorithms that can process millions of data points in moments, detecting patterns and producing recommendations or even final decisions in real time. At its core, algorithmic governance is a form of governance where decision-making and coordination are carried out by algorithms. These algorithms follow explicit rules and logic, often using statistical models and artificial intelligence to guide their actions. Social theorists describe algorithmic governance as a new mode of social ordering, data-driven, automated, and, in many ways, less dependent on traditional human hierarchies. This shift is not just theoretical. It has real implications for how societies are organized, how policies are made, and how citizens interact with their governments and each other. The rise of algorithmic governance has not happened in isolation. It is deeply connected to debates about datafication, the process by which aspects of life are transformed into data, and the growing use of surveillance to manage populations. Every online transaction, social media post, or digital interaction generates new data, feeding into the vast reservoirs that algorithms draw upon. This data-centric approach promises greater transparency, efficiency, and responsiveness. Yet it also raises profound questions about bias, agency, and the erosion of privacy. Who designs these algorithms? Whose interests do they serve? How can we ensure that automated decisions are fair and accountable? To grasp the significance of algorithmic governance, it helps to compare it to earlier models. Traditional governance, especially in the public sector, was marked by hierarchical decision-making, paper-based records, and processes often opaque to outsiders. Decisions flowed downward from legislatures and executive offices with little real-time feedback or adaptability. In contrast, digital governance, a precursor and companion to algorithmic governance, introduced new levels of transparency and efficiency. Digital systems enabled better communication, streamlined workflows, and made government data more accessible to the public. However, algorithmic governance goes further. Rather than simply digitizing records or automating routine tasks, it embeds algorithms deep within the fabric of governance itself. In some cases, algorithms are entrusted with decisions that once required lengthy human deliberation, such as determining eligibility for social benefits, prioritizing medical treatments, or guiding police patrols. The shift is not just in the tools used, but in the very logic of governance, from rule-based, human-centered deliberation to data-driven, automated processes. This transition has been especially pronounced in the early decades of the 21st century. Scholars identify the rise of algorithmic governance as a transformative shift not only in state administration but across many sectors. In the labor market, for example, employers increasingly use algorithms to manage workers, allocate tasks, and assess performance. In digital communication, algorithms decide which news stories or social media posts are seen by billions, shaping public discourse in both visible and invisible ways. The forces driving the adoption of algorithmic governance are varied. On one hand, there is the sheer volume and complexity of information that modern societies must handle. Human decision-makers cannot process the torrents of data generated each day, making algorithms an appealing solution for sorting, analyzing, and acting on information at scale. At the same time, the promise of greater efficiency and objectivity has fueled enthusiasm for automated systems. Proponents argue that algorithms can make decisions faster, more consistently, and, at least in theory, more fairly than fallible human bureaucrats. Yet, as algorithmic governance has expanded, concerns about its limitations and risks have grown. One of the most persistent challenges is bias. Algorithms are only as objective as the data and rules that shape them, and efforts to address fairness through algorithms have shown that biases can easily be coded into automated systems. These biases may reflect long-standing social inequalities or arise from technical choices made by designers and engineers. As a result, algorithmic decisions can unintentionally reinforce discrimination or produce outcomes that are difficult to explain or contest. This has led to calls for greater transparency and accountability in algorithmic governance. If algorithms are to take on roles once reserved for humans, it becomes essential to understand how they operate, what data they use, and how their decisions can be challenged or revised. Scholars and policymakers emphasize the need for human-centered approaches, frameworks that ensure algorithms align with democratic values and protect individual rights. This is no easy task. Algorithms can be extraordinarily complex, and their logic is often opaque even to experts. Nevertheless, the legitimacy of algorithmic governance depends on its ability to operate within institutional standards and uphold the principles of accountability and fairness. The concept of the algorithmic state captures the most far-reaching vision of this transformation. In such a state, artificial intelligence and machine-to-machine systems are not just tools for human decision-makers, but integral components of governance itself. Decision-making, institutional structures, and even questions of legitimacy are reconfigured by the pervasive integration of algorithms. This raises profound questions about the balance between efficiency and accountability, the role of human judgment, and the future of democratic institutions. Despite the rapid advance of algorithmic governance, its adoption is neither uniform nor uncontested. Different sectors and countries have embraced algorithmic systems to varying degrees, shaped by local contexts, legal frameworks, and cultural attitudes toward technology. In the public sector, for example, the integration of algorithms into policy and regulation has sparked spirited debates about the right balance between human oversight and automation. Some advocate for maintaining human judgment, arguing that algorithms should serve as decision support tools rather than replacements for human agency. Others see the potential for algorithms to overcome the limitations of traditional bureaucracy, ushering in a new era of efficient, data-driven governance. What is clear is that the shift toward algorithmic governance is not simply a matter of technological progress. It is a fundamental evolution in how societies are organized and governed, with implications that reach far beyond the technical details of software and data. It challenges long-standing assumptions about who or what should make decisions, how those decisions should be justified, and how power should be distributed and checked. The success of algorithmic governance depends not only on the sophistication of the algorithms themselves, but also on the human capital that designs, implements, and oversees them. Expertise in data science, ethics, law, and public administration is essential for developing systems that are both effective and legitimate. Interdisciplinary research is increasingly recognized as vital for understanding the complex interplay between technology, society, and governance. Scholars have called for robust frameworks and research agendas that draw on insights from computer science, social theory, law, and beyond. Only by engaging with these diverse perspectives can societies hope to navigate the challenges and opportunities of algorithmic governance. Despite its transformative potential, algorithmic governance does not render traditional forms of governance obsolete. Instead, it reconfigures existing modes of organization, blending elements of hierarchy, market mechanisms, and networked coordination with the distinctive logic of algorithms. This process of reconfiguration is ongoing and contested, with new norms, rules, and practices emerging in response to the capabilities and limitations of algorithmic systems. One of the key distinctions between digital governance and algorithmic governance lies in the degree of automation and the centrality of data-driven decision-making. Digital governance brought about transparency and improved communication, making processes more accessible and efficient. Algorithmic governance, on the other hand, moves beyond facilitating human decision-making to actually making decisions autonomously, based on data and preset rules. This transition raises new questions about the boundaries of human and machine agency and about who is ultimately responsible for the outcomes produced by automated systems. The debate about the future of governance in the digital age is far from settled. As algorithms become more deeply embedded in the machinery of government, business, and daily life, societies must grapple with the ethical, legal, and social implications of this shift. Questions of fairness, accountability, and democratic legitimacy are unlikely to disappear. Instead, they will become even more pressing as the line between human and algorithmic decision-making continues to blur. Ultimately, the foundations of algorithmic governance rest on more than just code and data. They are shaped by the choices societies make about how to balance competing values, efficiency and accountability, innovation and oversight, automation and human judgment. The story of algorithmic governance is still being written, shaped by ongoing debates, evolving technologies, and the collective efforts of those who seek to harness the power of algorithms while safeguarding the principles that underpin democratic society. As we look to the future, one thing is certain: algorithmic governance has become a key concept in the digital society, reframing not only how decisions are made, but also how power is exercised and contested. Its evolution from traditional governance models marks a pivotal chapter in the ongoing story of how humans organize themselves, confront challenges, and aspire to build more just, responsive, and effective systems of social order. The journey from paper-based hierarchies to data-driven algorithms is far from over, and its ultimate destination remains a matter of debate, innovation, and collective choice. At the heart of algorithmic governance are mechanisms that transform raw data into decisions with real-world consequences. These mechanisms are not just abstract ideas, they are the digital engines powering modern governance in both public and private sectors. To understand how algorithmic governance works in practice, we must trace the journey from data collection to automated decision-making and examine the many fields where these processes are applied. The process typically begins with a straightforward act: collecting data. In algorithmic governance, data is essentially gathered from a wide range of sources, both structured and unstructured, including financial records, sensor feeds, social media activity, and digital traces from everyday transactions. This data is not collected for its own sake. It serves as the raw material that algorithms use to learn, predict, and ultimately decide. The quality, scope, and depth of this data fundamentally influence the outcomes of algorithmic systems and thus affect the institutions and individuals subject to their decisions. After data is collected, it is processed by computational models, with machine learning playing a central role. In governance, machine learning is not a fixed set of instructions, but a dynamic process. Algorithms detect patterns, infer relationships, and adjust their internal models as new data becomes available. In corporate settings, machine learning frameworks are increasingly used to support decision-making and manage risk. These systems analyze complex financial trends, assess candidate suitability during recruitment, and evaluate employee performance. The appeal is clear. With algorithms, organizations can process information at a speed and scale far beyond human capability. However, the mechanics of algorithmic governance go beyond simple number crunching. Automated decision rules are at the core of these systems. These rules, whether straightforward if-then statements or advanced probabilistic models, determine how data is interpreted and what actions are taken. In the public sector, automated decision-making systems are used to determine eligibility for government benefits, flag potential fraud, and allocate scarce resources. These systems do more than inform human officials. They can directly trigger administrative actions, such as approving or denying benefits or initiating investigations based on detected anomalies. As algorithmic governance becomes more prevalent, scholars have proposed structured frameworks to guide its implementation. In the corporate world, one such approach is a four-pillar model for artificial intelligence-assisted board governance. This framework aims to integrate artificial intelligence into core governance functions, from recruitment and hiring to financial risk analysis and performance evaluation. It is important to distinguish between algorithmic governance, where algorithms execute established rules or models, and artificial intelligence governance, which involves broader oversight, ethical management, and strategic deployment of artificial intelligence. While these areas often overlap in practice, their operational processes and concerns can differ significantly. Transparency and accountability remain persistent challenges in algorithmic governance, especially when machine learning is involved. Complex algorithms, such as those using deep neural networks or ensemble methods, often function as black boxes, producing decisions without clear explanations of how those outcomes were reached. This opacity can erode trust, particularly when decisions impact people's lives or livelihoods. Scholars and practitioners increasingly stress the importance of interpretability, developing models and frameworks that enable human overseers to understand, audit, and, when necessary, challenge algorithmic decisions. Yet, achieving true interpretability remains a significant challenge, especially as models become more complex and datasets grow larger. To address the risks and uncertainties of automated decision-making, public institutions have begun using tools for impact assessment. These tools evaluate the effects, both intended and unintended, of algorithmic systems before and after deployment. For example, government agencies may use impact assessments to determine whether automated eligibility screening for social benefits produces equitable outcomes across different demographic groups, or whether fraud detection systems disproportionately target certain populations. The goal is not only to optimize efficiency, but also to ensure that algorithmic governance aligns with principles of fairness, justice, and social responsibility. The applications of algorithmic governance are as diverse as the fields they affect. In public administration, algorithms now play a direct role in regulatory enforcement. They monitor compliance with rules and regulations, detect signs of non-compliance, and help identify cases that require further investigation. For example, algorithms are used to analyze procurement data for suspicious patterns that might indicate corrupt tenders or money laundering schemes. By automating the initial stages of detection, public agencies can focus human expertise on the most complex or ambiguous cases, theoretically increasing both efficiency and accuracy. However, this shift also raises concerns about the loss of human discretion. While algorithms can process more data more quickly than human inspectors, their decisions are only as reliable as the data and rules on which they are based. There is a risk that automated systems may reinforce existing biases or overlook subtle forms of wrongdoing that escape algorithmic detection. Law enforcement has become one of the most visible and debated areas for algorithmic governance. Predictive policing algorithms, for instance, are used to anticipate where crimes are most likely to occur or to assess which individuals are at higher risk of offending or victimization. These systems rely on historical crime data, arrest records, and other variables to allocate police resources more strategically. Supporters argue that such algorithms can make policing more effective and efficient, enabling departments to do more with limited resources. Yet, these systems have also sparked intense debates about fairness and bias. Critics worry that predictive policing can reinforce patterns of over-policing in certain neighborhoods, especially those already under increased scrutiny. Experimental studies have explored public trust in algorithmic police decision-making, showing that perceptions of fairness and transparency are crucial for legitimacy. When people understand how decisions are made and believe the process is just, they are more likely to trust and accept the outcomes, even if they do not always agree with them. Beyond predictive policing, law enforcement agencies have adopted a range of algorithmic tools for identification, surveillance, forensic analysis, and risk assessment. Facial recognition systems, for example, can scan public spaces or analyze digital images to identify suspects or missing persons. Automated systems can also sift through large volumes of electronic evidence, flagging items for closer human review. While these tools offer clear operational advantages, their use raises ongoing questions about privacy, due process, and the potential for error or abuse. As algorithms gain influence in law enforcement, the need for robust oversight and thorough impact assessment becomes increasingly urgent. The use of algorithms in public administration also extends to screening applicants for government services, calculating benefit levels, and flagging suspicious activity for fraud investigation. While these systems are designed to improve speed and consistency, they can unintentionally encode or amplify social biases if the underlying data reflects existing inequalities. For example, if historical data used to train a benefits eligibility algorithm includes biased decisions, the algorithm may learn and perpetuate those patterns unless corrective measures are implemented. This dynamic has led to heightened scrutiny of fairness in algorithmic decision-making, particularly in areas like hiring and public service delivery. Scholars have pointed out that employer intent and the design of artificial intelligence hiring tools can determine whether biases are reduced or reinforced, prompting calls for greater transparency in both data selection and model construction. In recent years, digital government services have been further transformed by the integration of generative artificial intelligence. These systems go beyond rule-based automation or static decision trees. They can generate new content, draft policy recommendations, or simulate the impacts of proposed regulations. The rise of generative artificial intelligence in the public sector has created new possibilities for resource allocation and service delivery, but it has also made the governance landscape more complex. Managing these advanced systems requires not only technical expertise, but also new frameworks for responsible oversight. What some researchers describe as governance from a complex, adaptive systems perspective. This approach acknowledges that algorithmic governance is not a linear process, but a dynamic interaction among actors, technologies, and institutional norms, each influencing and adapting to the others over time. As algorithmic systems become more central to public administration, the line between informing decisions and executing administrative acts becomes increasingly blurred. In the past, algorithms might have simply highlighted options or surfaced patterns for human consideration. Today, they are often authorized to make decisions with binding effects, from approving social benefits to allocating emergency resources during crises. This shift, sometimes called algorithmic regulation, offers potential advantages in speed and objectivity, but it also introduces new risks. Automated systems can produce outcomes that are difficult to contest or reverse, particularly if their inner workings are opaque or not well understood by those affected. The challenge of transparency is especially pronounced in regulatory enforcement. While algorithms can help monitor compliance and flag potential violations, they can also obscure the reasoning behind enforcement actions, making it harder for individuals or organizations to understand why they have been targeted. This can undermine the legitimacy of regulatory regimes, especially if errors or biases go unnoticed. The replacement of human discretion by algorithms is not inherently negative. After all, human decision-making can also be inconsistent or biased. But it requires careful management to ensure that automation does not come at the cost of accountability or fairness. Across all these domains, one lesson is clear. The effectiveness and legitimacy of algorithmic governance rely on the thoughtful design of both technological systems and institutional processes. Data must be collected, curated, and used with attention to quality and representativeness. Machine learning models must be built with interpretability and oversight in mind, so their outputs can be examined and, if necessary, challenged. Automated decision rules must be transparent and subject to regular review to guard against unintended consequences and evolving social values. At the same time, algorithmic governance is not a static achievement but an ongoing endeavor. New applications continue to emerge, from artificial intelligence-powered boardrooms to digital government services shaped by generative models. Each innovation brings new opportunities and challenges, demanding interdisciplinary expertise and adaptive frameworks to keep pace with technological change. Responsible governance of these systems, as some researchers suggest, must be rooted in an understanding of complexity, recognizing the interplay of algorithms, data, institutions, and the people whose lives are shaped by their decisions. As algorithmic governance becomes more deeply embedded in both public and private sectors, the stakes continue to rise. The choices made today in designing, deploying, and overseeing these systems will shape not only the efficiency of administration or the effectiveness of regulation, but also the core values of fairness, accountability, and trust on which governance depends. The journey from raw data to real-world decisions is filled with technical and ethical challenges, but it is also the crucible in which the future of governance is being forged. Algorithmic governance stands at a crossroads of promise and complexity. It offers the potential for more impartial, efficient, and responsive decision-making, while also raising serious concerns about transparency, fairness, and public trust. As societies weave algorithms into the fabric of governance, the landscape is shaped by a continual interplay between opportunity and challenge. Each advance in computational power and data analysis opens new doors, but also brings fresh ethical dilemmas and social tensions to light. One of the most compelling opportunities of algorithmic governance is its ability to enhance consistency and efficiency. When carefully designed, algorithms can process vast amounts of data at speeds far beyond human capability, identifying subtle patterns and optimizing resource allocation. This efficiency is especially valuable in situations requiring rapid, large-scale decisions, such as managing public health crises, streamlining social services, or distributing emergency resources. The possibility of reducing bureaucratic inertia and minimizing human error is significant. In theory, algorithms can help eliminate arbitrary decision-making and introduce a level of uniformity that traditional processes struggle to achieve. However, these strengths also introduce new vulnerabilities. The design of any algorithmic system is never neutral. It reflects the values, assumptions, and objectives of its creators, as well as the training data it relies upon. Scholars have highlighted what is often called the algorithmic problem in artificial intelligence governance, the challenge of aligning algorithmic outputs with complex societal values, and the inherent subjectivity in defining what constitutes a good or fair decision. Unlike discrete problems with clear, objective answers, many governance questions require continuous judgments where accuracy and fairness are matters of degree and perspective. This subjectivity is further complicated by the influence of training data, which may carry historical biases or social inequalities that become embedded in the algorithm's logic. Bias, therefore, is central to the debate over algorithmic governance. Research in fields like healthcare has shown that machine learning models can create disparities in outcomes when trained on biased or unrepresentative data, potentially worsening existing inequities. Addressing this risk requires intentional action at every stage, from data collection and model training to evaluation and deployment. The ethical imperative is clear. Algorithms must not only avoid amplifying existing injustices, but should, where possible, help to correct them. This is a difficult task, as bias can enter through subtle choices, such as which data to include, how to define categories, or which outcomes to prioritize. Transparency and explainability are closely related concerns. For an algorithmic system to be legitimate in the eyes of those it affects, it must offer some degree of intelligibility. People need to understand how decisions are made, what data is used, and how outcomes can be challenged or revised. Yet many advanced algorithmic models, especially those based on deep learning or complex statistical methods, operate as black boxes, producing recommendations or decisions whose inner workings are opaque even to experts. This lack of transparency undermines accountability, making it difficult for both citizens and administrators to scrutinize the reasoning behind decisions or to identify and correct errors. The challenge of transparency becomes even more acute when governments outsource algorithmic governance to private sector vendors. Increasingly, public authorities depend on proprietary artificial intelligence systems developed by technology firms, adding layers of complexity and risk. Regulatory gaps often allow these third-party systems to operate with limited public oversight, and the underlying algorithms may be protected by intellectual property laws. This situation raises profound questions about democratic control and public trust. When key decisions are mediated by algorithms designed and operated outside the public eye, citizens may find it difficult to hold anyone accountable for mistakes or injustices. Research shows that such arrangements can erode the perceived legitimacy of automated decision-making among both public administrators and the general public. Legitimacy is, in fact, a foundational concern. Studies indicate that the way algorithmic systems incorporate or reflect citizen preferences has a significant impact on their acceptance. If people feel their values and priorities are represented in automated decisions, they are more likely to view these systems as legitimate. Conversely, when algorithms seem distant, unresponsive, or inscrutable, legitimacy suffers. Translating complex human preferences into machine-readable terms is itself a delicate process, fraught with potential for misalignment and misunderstanding. Public attitudes toward algorithmic governance are nuanced. On one hand, there is hope that algorithms can bring greater objectivity and fairness to public administration, reducing the influence of human prejudice. On the other, concerns persist about bias, misinformation, and lack of transparency. Empirical research shows a strong link between perceptions of fairness and trust. When people believe an algorithmic system is fair, taking relevant circumstances into account and producing equitable outcomes, they are more likely to trust both the system and the authorities using it. This trust is crucial for the legitimacy of algorithmic governance. Without it, even the most technically advanced systems may struggle to gain public acceptance. Trust and trustworthiness are not solely technical issues. They are shaped by broader social and institutional factors, including the reputation and intentions of those implementing algorithmic systems. Research demonstrates that public trust in artificial intelligence varies depending on who is perceived to be responsible for its use, whether government agencies, private companies, or independent regulators. Building trust requires more than technical solutions. It demands strategies for stakeholder engagement, transparent communication, and ongoing oversight. The ethical landscape of algorithmic governance is rich and contested. Scholars have identified a constellation of values: bias mitigation, transparency, explainability, accountability, oversight, data privacy, and security that form the core of responsible algorithmic design and deployment. Each value presents its own challenges. For instance, Ensuring data privacy is particularly complex in areas like health data science, where sensitive information is both highly valuable and deeply personal. Protecting privacy requires robust technical safeguards, clear legal frameworks, and a commitment to minimizing unnecessary data collection and use. Accountability is another central pillar. For algorithmic governance to be effective and just, there must be clear lines of responsibility. Someone must be answerable when an algorithmic decision goes wrong. Responsible artificial intelligence governance increasingly emphasizes the need for oversight bodies, impact assessments, and mechanisms for redress. Some frameworks advocate for dynamic approaches that embed ethical reflection and stakeholder engagement throughout the lifecycle of algorithmic systems, rather than treating ethics as a one-time requirement. The legal and regulatory environment is evolving in response to these challenges. Developments like the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act reflect a growing recognition of the need for comprehensive ethical frameworks to guide artificial intelligence use and governance. These frameworks typically require systems to be transparent, explainable, and subject to human oversight, especially when decisions have significant impacts on individuals or society. Yet, regulatory gaps remain, particularly where algorithmic governance is outsourced to private actors or where existing laws have not kept pace with technological change. Amid these uncertainties, a range of ethical theories and governance models have been proposed to guide responsible artificial intelligence adoption. Utilitarian approaches focus on maximizing overall well-being, aiming to design algorithms that produce the greatest good for the greatest number. Deontological perspectives, by contrast, emphasize adherence to moral rules and the protection of individual rights, insisting that certain principles such as fairness or privacy should never be violated, regardless of outcomes. Virtue ethics encourages designers and policymakers to cultivate qualities like honesty, prudence, and empathy, fostering a culture of ethical reflection and moral responsibility. Each perspective offers valuable insights, but also highlights the difficulty of balancing competing values in practice. Stakeholder involvement is widely recognized as essential for ethical algorithmic governance. Broad engagement, including the perspectives of citizens, experts, affected groups, and civil society, can help ensure that algorithms reflect a plurality of values and priorities. Participatory approaches may also enhance the perceived legitimacy and trustworthiness of automated systems by giving people a voice in their design and evaluation. Fairness, too, is an evolving concept in algorithmic decision-making. Research suggests that perceptions of fairness depend not only on outcomes, but also on process, whether individuals feel their circumstances have been considered, and whether there is meaningful opportunity for recourse or contestation. Human-algorithm collaboration may play a key role here. When algorithms support rather than replace human judgment, there is potential to combine the strengths of both and mitigate some risks of automation. As algorithmic governance advances, the need for dynamic, adaptive frameworks becomes increasingly urgent. Responsible implementation is not a static goal, but an ongoing process of learning, reflection, and adjustment. Emerging models stress the importance of continuous monitoring, regular audits, and the flexibility to respond to new evidence or changing social expectations. At the organizational level, this means embedding ethical considerations into every stage of algorithm development and use, from initial design through deployment and ongoing oversight. The future of algorithmic governance will undoubtedly be shaped by the tensions and trade-offs explored here. The promise of greater efficiency and fairness must be balanced against the risks of bias, opacity, and loss of public trust. Legal and ethical frameworks will continue to evolve, informed by both theoretical reflection and empirical research. Ultimately, the legitimacy and effectiveness of algorithmic governance will depend on society's ability to navigate these challenges with humility, openness, and a commitment to shared values. In the end, algorithmic governance is not simply a technical project, but a profoundly social one. The systems we build reflect our collective choices about what matters, who decides, and how power is exercised. As this chapter in governance continues to unfold, the task ahead is to ensure that algorithms serve not only the logic of efficiency, but also the principles of justice, accountability, and human dignity. The journey is ongoing, and the stakes, nothing less than the shape of our common life, could hardly be higher.